All right, good morning or good afternoon, everyone, depending on where you are. My name is Michael Gummel from Paradigm Technology Consulting, and today we are hosting our monthly ISV Spotlight. Today we are spotlighting the ONESOURCE integration from Thomson Reuters. With us today we have Shane and Al from Thomson Reuters, who are going to be walking through the presentation today. This presentation is being recorded. If you do have any questions, please use the chat bar on the side, the GoToMeeting chat, and we'll be taking a look at those questions as we go through. We'll also have some additional time at the very end for questions. So with that, I will turn it over to Shane.
Great, thanks, Michael. As everyone mentioned, or as Michael mentioned, my name is Shane Macanati. I'm a Strategic Alliance Manager with Thomson Reuters, and it's a pleasure to be here. With me is Al Moratoya, who's a systems engineer based in Atlanta. He's going to be going through our Microsoft integration for Dynamics GP. So that's typically what we're going to cover today. We're going to talk about sales and use tax a little bit. I'm going to go through an intro of Thomson Reuters, simply as a company, what we cover, and what our ONESOURCE integration looks like from a high level. And then Al is going to take you through a GP functional overview and take you on a walkthrough through that. So let's get started here. So next slide. So Thomson Reuters, just an introduction. We're a $12.6 billion company made up of several different parts. Tax and accounting just being a portion. We also have legal, financial services, news, life sciences, and several other branches that make up our one company. We operate in over 100 plus countries, service over 10,000 plus clients. We have 55,000 employees. We have a 97% customer retention rate and over 150,000 plus users on our ONESOURCE brand at this point. Next slide, Al. What is ONESOURCE? ONESOURCE simply is a global suite that addresses corporations' tax needs. It includes software and, more importantly, the tax research and content required to address a corporation's global tax needs. ONESOURCE Indirect Tax specifically addresses those needs at a transactional basis. This includes sales tax as part of the order-to-cash or sales processes, use tax as part of the purchasing process, and value-added tax as part of global sales and purchasing. The key business value of using ONESOURCE Indirect Tax is to address the bottom line cost of errors in corporations' indirect tax processes. There are multiple reasons for these errors, and they all stem from miscalculation of tax. As you can see from the graphic, for every 1 million in transactions, approximately $60,000 is wasted in transaction tax costs, including cost of manual tax processes, errors in sales and use tax calculation, etc. Next slide. How are we different? ONESOURCE is a trusted and recognized global brand. At this point, we operate in over 175 plus countries in over 15,000 jurisdictions in the U.S. alone. We are an unrivaled global vantage point. Our content is used by Big Four accounting firms and also the IRS, and we service several enterprise level clients. Next slide. Here's just a sample size of our customer base. So at the enterprise level, we service large corporations such as Microsoft, Dow Chemical, GM, Shell, Delta, to name a few. And then with our cloud solution, Groupon, BrainLab, BMW, Google. These are just a sample size of the companies that we represent at this point. Next slide. And here's a graphic just to illustrate how our end-to-end tax solution calculates. So we have a flexible integration option for multiple systems. So today we're looking specifically at GP. We also have integrations into AX, and we are also building one into NAV. And we all have other ERP systems and e-commerce platforms that we also have an integration built into. We are the only patented high-performance determination engine specializing in global taxation, as mentioned earlier, over 15,000 U.S. and Canadian and VAT jurisdictions, exemption certificates, taxability categories, all the way complete through signature-ready returns. Next slide. This is a graphic just to illustrate our level of partnership with Microsoft. We sponsor several different events, including all the user groups, summits for GP, CRM, AX. We're also going to be we were at Reimagine last year, we were at Convergence last year. We are all at all the Microsoft events and are heavily invested in the Dynamics community and understand it very well. Next slide. Why ONESOURCE? Number one, trust. ONESOURCE calculates tax leveraging our own in-house tax research covering over 15,000 jurisdictions as mentioned in the U.S. and Canada, eliminating the need to maintain independent tax schedules and details. Research tax laws or enter tax rate. Number two, automation. ONESOURCE automatically determines product service taxability and applies exemption certificates to transactions. And number three, we're a comprehensive solution. The ONESOURCE solution and integration to Microsoft Dynamics covers all of your tax transactions, sales order processing, purchase order processing, project accounting, and ensures highly accurate tax by embedding the address validation and claim. Next slide. Typical ONESOURCE customer. So if you're a customer looking at this, or if you're working with if you're a partner working with one of your customers, who is a typical ONESOURCE customer? Companies with relatively complex tax needs that do business in multiple states and or countries and complicated tax and organizational structures. These are typical customers that we would like to talk to. What are your typical pain points in tax? Recently experienced a tough or a bad audit that resulted in fines and penalties. Spending too many resources managing their sales tax, including calculation and sales tax returns creation for compliance. So these are the typical customers that we'd like to talk to. So when you look at your organization from a high level and you think about it, these are some questions that you need to ask yourself or your customers. Do you have the need to calculate and pay the correct sales or use tax? Do you sell both products and services? Do you purchase both products and services? Does your company have multiple locations in multiple states? Does your company manufacture products? Does your finance team manually calculate sales tax or manually review invoices to make sure the tax is correct? These are several questions that you need to ask, and if so, if yes is the answer to any of these questions, we might be a great solution for you. And at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Al to go through a demonstration of our ONESOURCE integration for Microsoft Dynamics GP.
Thanks, Shane. So once again, hello everyone. Al Morataya, Systems Engineer with Thomson Reuters Tax Division. We'll talk about Thomson Reuters ONESOURCE Indirect Tax Determination Solution and the way they'll interact and communicate with Dynamics GP through our integration package. This will be a functional overview of our indirect tax solution, not a technical deep dive, but a high-level overview of the most significant points and features. So quickly, what is ONESOURCE Indirect Tax? It is Thomson Reuters' tax policy management system that automates the entire indirect tax process. As Shane indicated, our ONESOURCE Indirect Tax solution is a suite comprised of several components. Our global tax research and content that provides tax rates and product taxability information for the U.S., Canada, and more than 180 countries around the world. The ONESOURCE Indirect Tax Determination Engine, which happens to be the heart and soul of the suite. It integrates many applications like Dynamics GP or any other that may require a call for tax. And our third piece here is our ONESOURCE US and VAT compliance module, which provides return preparation for the US and Canada, electronic filing, and audit reporting. So not only I'll show the interaction between the ONESOURCE tax engine and Dynamics GP, but also how the engine would leverage our tax content and feed information to the compliance module. To do that, let's have a quick overview of how data will flow once ONESOURCE has been deployed. On the left-hand side of the screen, we see business transactions taking place within Dynamics GP. And these transactions could be order to cash, procure to pay. There could be sales or purchases of goods or services, or even project related. Here we see that the ONESOURCE determination engine has already been configured to meet your needs. It has been set up with your company policy, and it has been updated with the latest tax content and tax rates provided by us, Thomson Reuters. We also see that our integration package for Dynamics GP has already been installed and configured. It is communicating with GP and the tax engine, which is now ready to go, waiting for tax requests from GP and respond right away. During a generation or completion of a transaction, a request for tax will be sent from GP through our integration package to the tax engine. And the tax request will include transaction data such as this. Ship from, ship to locations, a quantity, an amount, and maybe more. So with this information, the tax engine will calculate which taxes or exceptions may apply, and then send a response back to GP. The response will contain the correct tax amounts and tax rates. And notice that in this example, the taxes are distributed by zone as formatted for Dynamics GP: city, district, and state. Now, when we send the response back to GP, we write to the GP transaction tables the same way that native GP writes to those tables. Now, as the engine is calculating the taxes and then sends the response back to GP, the engine also records all this information into an audit or compliance database. And the recorded information will look something like this: a transaction date, the name of a customer or vendor, the ship from, ship to locations, names of the authorities assessing the taxes, rates, amount, and more, such a GL account if you want to. So once recorded, all this information will be available to tax professionals through a web interface, which is nothing more than a web portal, like this one right here. And being a web portal, nothing more than you can use a browser such as Internet Explorer, Chrome, or in this case, Firefox. So being a web portal, this eliminates the installation and maintenance of any client software. So tax professionals will go into it, sign in, and then access the recorded information for the generation and retrieval of audit reports, analytical reports, management of certificates if you need to do so, prepare tax returns, and file taxes. So as you see, ONESOURCE becomes your end-to-end solution from transaction generation all the way to filing of taxes, not only providing accurate taxability for items and services, but also allowing tax professionals to perform compliance tasks. This whole process here, the call for tax, the calculation of the taxes, the recording of the data, and the response with the results, it all happens behind the scenes, and it's typically done in real time. And it happens very, very quickly, within 80 to 120 milliseconds. For our Dynamics GP customers, we offer our deployment option in the cloud, where the engine, the audit database, and the entire infrastructure to support it will reside in one of our own secure data centers. So now let's talk about the actual integration package for Dynamics GP. I'll cover installation and configuration, address validation, and other topics that you see here. This is a simple slide showing the relationship of Dynamics GP on the left and ONESOURCE on the right. And we support all the items that you see under each application. We support address validation for a GP for customers and sales shipped to addresses. In regards to the order to cash side of the fence, we support transactions like sales orders, invoice entry, and it's important to notice that besides order to cash transactions, we also support purchasing and project accounting, which are huge differentiators. On the ONESOURCE side of the fence, we support features that we have been talking through our presentation. All the authorities for the products and services, exception certificates, and more. We support quite a few flavors of GP to include several major releases and service packs, and we support several databases as you see here. The scope of our current release of our Dynamics GP integration is for the US and Canada. However, as OneSource natively supports use tax and VAT, Dynamics GP customers can also take advantage of use tax and VAT calculations using our data file integrator, which is Thomson Reuters Universal Connector for batch processes. Or for other real-time calculations, they can leverage OneSource Web Services, which is an embedded component of our tax engine. Our integration package, of course, needs to be installed. So our installation package for our GP integration provides quick deployment, and it includes a GP activation code, associated files, and documentation that will help you with installation and implementation. The typical deployment mechanism is to drop an auto-compile chunk file and the GP dictionaries in your client or GP server. And once you start your Dynamics GP, it will recognize that the new integration code is available. You will see then a new set of menus that have been added to the system, and then, of course, some configuration will have to be done for GP to work with OneSource determination. In order for GP to connect to our OneSource engine, you must indicate some data elements, such as URL of our OneSource engine in the cloud, an ID that will identify your company, a username, a password, a URL of our OneSource address validation services, and some other information. Also, master data must be set up to support OneSource indirect tax determination. So the following areas are covered. Under cards would be customer, site, items, and more. Now let's talk about item taxability and item codes. And let's step back a little here. By default, the OneSource tax determination engine utilizes the ship-to address of an item for tax calculation. And if you don't provide any other information besides the quantity and the item's amount, then the engine will provide standard taxability for the item or service. However, there may be situations where some information may be required for special taxability of certain items. For example, software, which could be downloaded or provided in CD or other physical media, which would then require a different tax treatment. Because, of course, this taxability would vary from one state to another. So we give you the ability to manage the taxability of an item on this screen right here, where we added a OneSource companion window so you can map your items to our tax categories to ensure the right tax is charged under the right circumstances. In essence, we add the product taxability code to the item's master. We also provide 3 options for master tax schedule setup and options for tax overrides. So these options are for customer cards, side cards, or to override the exempt status of a single line item. So we provide the 3 settings, and one of them is IDT. And IDT triggers a tax call to our tax engine and allows OneSource to provide taxability for an item, bypassing the native capability of GP. The second setting, which is IDT exempt, this could be used when a component, or a customer rather, may not have an exception certificate on file yet, and you need to manually override the sales tax. And the third one, which is IDT exempt O, does the opposite than the previous one. It is used to ignore exception certificates and tax the transaction. So at the end, installing and configuring our integration in GP is easy. It's pretty much a matter of following the prompts, provide the requested information, and off you go. It is straightforward, simple, and easy. So now let's get into the actual features of GP. Once that has been installed and configured, what can you do with it? So our integration for GP provides an address validation feature, and its purpose is for the accurate determination of taxes. As you know, an incomplete or inaccurate address can certainly affect tax calculations. If you only have the 5-digit zip code, if you're missing the additional 4 digits at the end, then tax calculations may not be as accurate as they could be. Zip codes can cross county boundaries. Let's say two counties may have different tax rates. So if we have the additional 4 digits for a zip code, we can nail things down and get the right county and the right rates. So how does it work, the address validation process? So when you enter an address, you will be presented with one of our screens with an option to validate the address, save the address without validation, or return to the address to make further changes manually. If you choose to validate an address, our OneSource integration shows you your original address and the validated address side by side. Notice here the addition of 4 digits to the zip code, the changes from road to the abbreviated RD as formatted by the U.S. Postal Service, and you can also see a message at the bottom indicating that the address was corrected. And at this point, you can click Accept, or you can edit your address and revalidate if necessary. So again, our address validation process is straightforward, and we help organizations pinpoint addresses and leave the guesswork out of it. Let's talk now about order-to-cash transactions. Our integration for GP supports the entire order-to-cash process to include transactions for these types of documents: quotes, orders, invoices, and returns. When generating sales orders, tax is always calculated behind the scenes when the transaction is saved. And once saved, if you want to view the tax details, then you would click right here. And then the taxes will be displayed, attributed to the appropriate zones or buckets. In this example, they are attributed to the city, the district, and state. You could also calculate taxes manually if you wanted to do so, in the event that you want to preview the taxes before saving it. And the way to do that is by clicking on this icon right here, Additional, and then select OneSource Calculate Tax. And then the taxes will be displayed. And what this does, it makes a call to the engine in the background behind the scenes. We also support invoice entry. And just like sales entries, tax is always calculated behind the scenes when a transaction is saved. And once saved, just like the previous transaction, if you want to preview the detail, then you would click here, and again, the taxes will be displayed, just like I showed with the sales order: city, district, and state. Now, we'll give you options on how to display the tax detail. So as you saw on the previous screen, by default, the implementation of GP it uses authority buckets and a maximum of 4. So it uses 4 authority buckets to represent tax results in GP. And they are city, county, district, and state. However, if you wish to assign a single GL account for each state, you can switch to a state-level only implementation. And you do that just by clicking this box right here, and then taxes will be returned by the state only, ignoring everything else. So, purchasing. Just like on the sales side, tax is always calculated behind the scenes when a transaction is saved. And once saved, again, you can click here if you want to review the tax detail. Notice that on a purchase order, things will be a little bit different here. The calculated tax is an estimate of the tax that you will expect to pay in your AP invoice. And here, what you see is only a summary of the detail, and that's what we show, the summary. And again, just like in the sales order, you can manually calculate taxes before saving by clicking on this icon, Additional, and then selecting OneSource Calculate Tax. Now, if you receive an invoice from a vendor and the vendor did not charge you any tax, we give you the option to calculate the tax and accrue the tax automatically. And in order to do that, you would click on this icon, on this icon right here, or button rather, distributions. Then you would delete the tax summary entry, which then would allow an accrual to occur. It takes us back to the previous screen, and then we click on distributions again. And we see now that our integration created tax entries for accrual for an expense, which is a debit, and for a payable account as a credit. Our support of GP project accounting is a unique feature of our ONESOURCE integration for GP. We support the functions that you see here: entries for timesheets, employee expense, equipment, and more. This is an example of an expense entry. And when entering an employee expense, it is important to indicate where the expense occurs. So we added this IDT companion window to indicate the location of an expense, whether at the employee office, at the location where they work from, or they actually are on site performing services, or somewhere else. So you would enter the invoicing information, project number, and add billings. Then you would add appropriate items or more billing entries. And as you do that, taxes will be automatically calculated in the background. And here we see the tax results distributed accordingly in the same fashion as if it was done with native tax. And this concludes the dynamic GP integration portion of the presentation. Shane? Do we have any comments or any questions?
Thanks, Al. Yep. So just in closing, ONESOURCE for Microsoft Dynamics, just giving you an idea of what it is. Again, it's a cloud-based solution that automates your sales tax processes by eliminating manual guesswork. So we hope that you found today's presentation beneficial, and we're definitely open for questions right now.
All right. Thank you, Shane, and thank you, Al. I do have a couple of questions that have come in via the chat. See, the first one here looks like, are your tax rates based on geocodes?
No, they're not. And one of the reasons, and the main reasons that we have the address validation / cleansing feature is because we don't use geocodes. And what is the geocode? It's pretty much a representation of an address. So we use the actual zip code plus the 4 digits after the zip code. And that is used for, yeah, and that's used for standard taxability. If you require a special taxability, and one of the examples that I talked about was software, then we also provide product mapping, which you can do through the engine, and also special taxability through GP.
Next question looks like it is around calculating use tax. What options are there within the system to calculate use taxes?
The ONESOURCE engine natively supports use tax. So you could use our data file integrator in order to do that. And when it comes to use tax, this is a process that does not require real-time response. So you can do it at your own, period, whether you want to do it at the end of the day, at the end of the week, at the end of the month, or whatever, and if you need to do it, then the data file integrator will be the tool to do so. You will receive data coming in from GP regarding all your purchases or anything on that side of the fence. It will talk to ONESOURCE and provide the taxability accordingly, and will allow also validation. Other things that we do here as well is that GP supports, our integration of GP supports that natively as well. So you can do it either way.
Very good. And another one here, and I think you kind of covered this during the presentation, but just to clarify for this individual, they're asking about setting up different GL accounts for each state tax.
I would assume that that has to do on the way that we present the taxes. If that's not the question is all about, then probably we can get some clarification later. But we provide options rather on how to present the tax, and by default we do it by the bucket method. So, and also we provide the option to do it by state only. So if you are generating a document that has items that need to be taxable at different states, so you can set it up to show taxability by state only, and you can assign a GL account to each state, so that can be done. So you could have a particular GL account for California, another one for Massachusetts, another one for Florida, and so on.
Looks like that is all the questions that I see come in right now. So at this point, I would like to thank both Shane and Al again for your time today, taking us through that presentation. It was very informative. If you do have any questions, if you have any follow-up questions that we didn't get answered this morning, please let us know. You can reach out to me at mgummel@ptcllc.com, or you can reach out to sales@ptcllc.com as well, and we'll make sure we get those questions answered for you. Shane or Al, any last comments?
No, just thank you guys for the time, and we hope it was informative, and we hope to hear from you in the future.
Okay, very good. Well, thank you all for attending today, taking a view of the OneSource integration to Dynamics GP. Look forward to hearing from you. Thank you.